They thought you were gone, faded, irrelevant. They spoke your name like a memory, something safe to mock, because they believed it couldn't rise again. They told stories about your failures, rewrote events to make themselves the heroes, and convinced each other that your silence meant defeat. But you weren't silent. You were building. You were learning how to move without noise, how to grow without validation, how to heal without witnesses. They thought they had buried you. Yet all they did was give you solitude. And in solitude, you became unrecognizable. When you returned, the air shifted. They couldn't name the feeling, but they felt it. The discomfort of realizing that the one they dismissed had evolved into the one they could never surpass. It hit them like a truck when they finally saw the truth. Every rumor, every plan, every attempt to erase you had been undone by your persistence. You never fought them directly because you understood the art of patience. You let their arrogance create openings while you strengthened your foundation. They believed dominance came from control, but you learned that true power comes from endurance. You never matched their noise. You outlasted it. They thought you were invisible, but invisibility was your camouflage. By the time they realized you weren't seeking their approval, you were replacing their influence. The revelation came not through confrontation, but through consequence. Their world began to revolve around the very name they tried to destroy. People who underestimate you always build their downfall with their own words. They measured your worth through temporary moments, never realizing that consistency always defeats performance. You were never competing for spotlight. You were sharpening your edge. They mocked your stillness, yet stillness was your weapon. You observed everything while they distracted themselves with ego. You learned how people expose themselves when they think no one's watching. You saw patterns, studied their weaknesses, and let them grow comfortable in their delusion. Then you moved once. Once was enough. When truth finally revealed itself, their confidence evaporated. They couldn't believe it was you because they built their identity around the idea that you had lost. You didn't announce your return. You didn't post about it or hint at it. You just walked into the same world that once overlooked you, and everything changed. Your energy carried weight now. People felt your presence before they saw your face. That's what happens when someone survives what was meant to break them. You didn't need revenge because your composure was vengeance in motion. They watched in disbelief as you took control of everything they once used against you. Your silence, your patience, your self-awareness. What they saw as weakness was simply refinement. They wanted chaos, but you gave them precision. They wanted reaction, but you gave them mastery. The irony was cruel. They spent their energy trying to destroy what they could have learned from. They studied your flaws but missed your evolution. They used manipulation while you built systems. They spread noise while you cultivated silence. They underestimated your intelligence because it wasn't loud enough for their fragile egos to recognize. You knew the difference between talking and thinking. And didn't. You let them believe they had the upper hand because arrogance always blinds itself. They mistook your distance for defeat. That was their mistake. You weren't retreating, you were regenerating. And regeneration is terrifying to those who thought they'd won. When it finally dawned on them, panic replaced confidence. They realized that every move they made had played into your timing. You didn't have to scheme, you just had to stay disciplined. While they tripped over their need for validation, you remained focused. Every rumor they spread only amplified your resilience. Every betrayal became a lesson. Every loss became data. You weaponized every failure they celebrated. By the time they recognized what was happening, you had already positioned yourself so far ahead that they couldn't even compete. You didn't rise suddenly. You rose consistently. Their shock wasn't about your success. It was about how blind they had been to your evolution. They whispered among themselves, trying to figure out when it happened. How did you turn pain into presence? How did you turn rejection into power? You didn't. You simply stopped letting emotion control strategy. You grew rational in a world addicted to impulse. You became calm where others became chaotic. That calm unnerved them more than rage ever could. They realized you had become something they could neither provoke nor predict. That's when the balance of power shifted. The moment they stopped understanding you was the moment they stopped controlling you. They called it sudden, but it was years in the making. Growth always looks like shock to those who never saw the work behind it. You didn't return to prove them wrong. You returned because you outgrew their relevance. You stopped living to defend your name and started living to fulfill your potential. That transition made you unstoppable. They tried to engage you, to pull you back into old battles, but you no longer spoke that language. You had rewritten your priorities, your patterns, your philosophy. Their tactics bounced off you because they were built for the version of you that no longer existed. They weren't fighting you anymore. They were fighting their own guilt for underestimating you. That's the real punishment. You didn't need to expose them. Time did that for you. There's a special silence when realization sets in. You saw it in their eyes. The panic masked as politeness, the forced smiles, the delayed responses. They couldn't process the contrast between their version of you and the one standing before them. You didn't have to gloat. You didn't have to say a word. Your existence was the reminder that their mockery aged badly. You carried yourself with a peace they couldn't fake. They wanted to ask how you did it, but pride held their tongues. You just smiled because you knew the answer would never fit their worldview. You didn't do anything miraculous. You simply stayed when they would have run. Chaos with grace is the art of moving through storms without losing rhythm. You've lived enough to understand that the world doesn't reward panic. It rewards precision. Where others break under pressure, you breathe slower. You've been through situations where emotion could have drowned you, yet you learned to turn it into direction. Grace isn't softness, it's control under fire. You carry calm like armor, but underneath there's calculation. They see elegance, but they don't see how many wars you've fought silently to build it. Chaos surrounds everyone, but you've mastered its language. You don't resist it. You orchestrate it. That's what terrifies them. You turn mess into motion. You don't fight the current, you redirect it. They expect chaos to consume, but you use it to clarify. When everything falls apart for others, it falls into place for you. You learn to find rhythm in destruction. You realize that not every explosion requires escape. Sometimes it demands observation. You became fluent in unpredictability. You know when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when silence cuts deeper. Grace isn't about being untouched. It's about moving untouched through things that should have destroyed you. They can't comprehend how you remain composed in situations that make others crumble. They assume you feel nothing, but you feel everything. You just refuse to let it distort your focus. You've learned that panic exposes weakness faster than truth ever could. People reveal themselves in pressure. They show who they are when control slips. You studied that. You used it. You learned to weaponize calm in moments designed to provoke you. Grace became your disguise and chaos became your classroom. You stopped taking conflict personally and started using it as data. While others argue for power, you study patterns. They act, you anticipate. They react, you reset. That's why your composure disturbs them. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't flinch. They can't predict someone who doesn't depend on predictability. Your stillness isn't peace, it's precision. In a world addicted to spectacle, composure has become revolutionary. You understood that drama keeps people distracted. They need chaos to feel relevant. You stopped giving them that satisfaction. You started choosing minimal words, measured gestures, and decisive action. Every step became deliberate. You didn't need to shout to command attention. Your restraint spoke louder. You turned self-control into power. They mistake your detachment for emptiness, but you know it's refinement. You no longer seek validation because chaos taught you something essential. Nobody can shake what you've stabilized within. You don't perform, you don't justify. You move like water, adjusting but never losing essence. They call it grace because they can't understand the discipline behind it. You earned that poise through countless trials. There were days you burned quietly, rebuilding your identity from ashes. But you learned to do it without bitterness. That's the difference between you and them. They collapse under chaos because they expect fairness. You don't. You've accepted the world's cruelty and refused to let it turn you venomous. Grace for you is choosing structure without surrender. You let pain refine your instincts, not control them. You became the rare kind of dangerous. The kind that doesn't announce vengeance but embodies inevitability. People who feed on reaction hate your kind of strength. They want emotion to validate their chaos. When you don't respond, they interpret it as superiority. Maybe it is. You've learned that responding to noise means lowering your frequency. You don't argue with storms when you've become one. Chaos with grace is how you rule rooms. You enter with calm so grounded it disorients those built on instability. They can't provoke someone who isn't performing. That's why you're feared silently. You represent balance in a world of extremes. You're proof that peace can be powerful, and that power can move quietly. There's psychology behind it too. The human mind craves reaction. It interprets silence as dominance. You discovered that unintentionally. The moment you stopped justifying yourself, people started questioning their own motives. You turned uncertainty into your shield. Grace isn't submission, it's control over expression. You became unpredictable by choice, revealing only fragments of yourself. That kept them guessing, analyzing, spiraling. The more they tried to provoke you, the more they exposed their instability. You let them mistake stillness for weakness, knowing stillness only bothers those addicted to chaos. And when the moment came, your calm dismantled everything their noise built. They've seen people collapse before. They've seen anger, tears, breakdowns, but not you. You respond differently. Your chaos is internalized, processed, and redirected into momentum. They expect destruction, but witness transformation instead. That's the kind of madness they can't control. You've mastered contrast, how to move through disaster with elegance. Your grace unsettles them because it contradicts their understanding of survival. They need rage to feel alive. You need purpose. They chase escape. You create direction. That's what chaos taught you, to use pain as a compass. Every setback became fuel. Every betrayal became blueprint. Every fall became alignment. They once thought control made you cold, but control made you compassionate. You no longer react to cruelty because you understand where it comes from. Fear. You no longer chase approval because you understand it's transactional. You no longer fight noise because you've learned silence wins longer battles. Grace is the quiet rebellion of someone who knows the value of energy. You don't waste it on explaining to the blind what light looks like. You walk forward, letting results speak for you. Chaos follows everyone. The difference is in how you dance through it. You've mastered that dance. You glide where others stumble. You pivot when others freeze. You turn every collapse into choreography.